Hey there, welcome or welcome back. I'm Reverend Nhien, founder of Evolving Enneagram, and we are in the midst of a 52-week Sunday Talk series based on this book by Oren Sofer, Your Heart Was Made for This. Today, I want to talk about something that I feel is deeply relevant to most of us in our modern day, which is the compulsions, addictions, or just habit patterns that don't serve our highest good in expressing our soul's full potential. Today's talk will be on something called surfing the urge, which I learned through a Buddhist friend of mine years and years ago. And this practice is designed to support you in compassionately moving away from those habit patterns. And I emphasize the term compassion because I personally recognize that as someone who found her spiritual journey, her awakening through the 12-step recovery rooms, through my own addictive pain, I recognize that releasing our addictions or compulsions or even our negative habits is far from easy, if you will. And oftentimes, our own shaming of ourselves when we re-engage in that can actually exacerbate, repeating the patterns. And in contrast, I found that the more that we are tender with ourselves as we recognize that letting go of patterns can be immensely challenging, right? That doesn't absolve us of almost like the soul level responsibility. So I'm not saying something we should do, more it's something for us to do, a gift to ourselves as an act of self-love to relinquish these more compulsive or addictive behaviors, whether it's uh, an unhealthy relationship with a person or with food or with material things, like a kind of hoarding instinct. Again, not judging it or damning ourselves for having it, but compassionately recognizing that we can't always shift from this survival mode into a thriving in our lives if we're not willing to look at these patterns and release them. So today, surfing the urge. I want to speak in three parts today. The first part, I'd like to explore the topic of renunciation, which has a lot of baggage, that word, but this is the word that Sofer uses in his book here. So I'll start with that word, kind of talk about renunciation and craving. And the second part, I want to offer you a teaching on the practice of surfing the urge. And then finally, I would like to share some Enneagram informed insights, just a few examples based on your type, what you might let go of in this practice of surfing the urge. All right, so part one, I really just want to read some wonderful writings by Sofer from his book. He writes, renunciation expresses the heart's innate capacity to let go and experience inner richness. Understanding directly how less is more, renunciation strips away distraction, reveals the improbable miracle of being alive, and fulfills us through contentment rather than accumulation. It reminds me a lot of the type 7's virtue of sobriety, right? Like this notion of enoughness. So moving on in his quote, renunciation checks the flood of craving and unlocks a door to our inner wealth. I believe it is one of the most overlooked inner resources. Many of us associate renunciation with deprivation, repression, or asceticism. Yes, renunciation entails restraint, but in Buddhism, its aim is fulfillment, not self-mortification. So what happens if you think of it as simplicity, non-addiction, letting go, or relinquishment? So those are, again, Sofer's words, and I want to continue with a little bit more here. He writes, craving can never be fulfilled through consumption because the nature of craving is always to need more, like a bucket with a hole in it. There are, of course, healthy desires in life, wanting to be happy, to help others, to learn a craft, to protect and enrich one's community. By contrast, craving or clinging involve an unconscious thirst, a reflexive hankering for something to fill us up. If you've ever been obsessed with a purchase or a lover or, he writes, a dessert, you know this terrible thirst. Part of what we crave is pleasure and the rush that comes from obtaining the object of our desire. But there is a difference between enjoying pleasure and craving it. Opening to the experience of healthy pleasure nourishes us. Let it in. But caught in the throes of craving, we grasp at experience, trying to possess it or make it last. Ironically, the contraction of craving curtails our uninhibited enjoyment of pleasure. So again, we're not making pleasure or happiness or anything like that wrong. Instead, what we're saying is, in a way, when we recognize that we have these urges for things that don't ever fill. In fact, it's, that hungry ghost idea. It's like the more we consume of it, it's like the hungrier we get, because we're not choosing that which actually fulfills, right? Renders us sated. And so I invite you to consider, this is part one here. I'm kind of like part one. I invite you to consider for yourself. You might even want to pause the video to reflect on what that is for you. That's not for me to tell you. It's more about what you, within the truth of your own being, come to see is not serving you at this moment in your life. It could be something that was helpful in the past, but you're just like, a little too much of it now. I mean, it could be, even for some people, something that's healthy, like working out, can become an addiction, right? So with that, here are the steps to urge surfing. First, do not fight with yourself or the urge, right? Instead, notice where you feel the urge in your body. Right? You might notice it as a movement in your chest, going up and out, maybe an antsiness of the legs. Notice where it is in your body, and then drop into the physical felt sensation of this urge. Notice its location. Does it have a weight, a temperature, a shape, a color? And then stay with it best you can for 5 to 10 minutes. Sensing into the felt sense of this urge as it presents in your physical body. And I invite you to hit pause now for 5 to 10 minutes. And now I invite you to consciously shift your attention to your breath for about 5 minutes. You might want to say to yourself, in breath, out breath, as you breathe. Focus on sending your in breath to the part of your body, feeling the urge to act. And so again, I invite you to hit pause for about 5 minutes as you notice your in-breath and your out-breath. Again, focus on sending your in-breath to the part of your body feeling the urge to act. And notice how the urge can come in waves. And see if you can physically sense those waves and just ride them until they dissipate. In-breath, out-breath, like waves in the ocean. See if you can physically sense the waves of your urges and just ride them until they dissipate. And do this for as long as you need, recognizing that urges usually peak at 20 to 30 minutes. And so again, I invite you to hit pause here to give yourself this self-loving gesture of simply urge surfing. So welcome back. How was that? If you were able to stay with yourself in the midst of your urge surfing, I invite you to give yourself a hug and feel that sense of inner calm that can happen when you've let yourself ride that wave. And if you felt challenged to stay with the practice, see if you can be kind to yourself. and affirm that you are learning how to surf, and that bringing this sense of presence on the inhale and the exhale, that is the movement of your urge, bringing this mindfulness can only enhance your life and bring more intentionality to your choices as time goes on. And now for part 3, let's turn to the Enneagram. And by the way, the book that I have written that's coming out in early 2025 has a chapter called Surfing the Urge. So you'll be able to read this and reference this material in there as well as soon as the book comes out. But for type 1s, you might consider surfing the urge to clean, or organize everything before you make time for your rest or your play. You might want to experiment with doing the easy thing first or in between your responsibilities, even though what's, quote, easy might feel much harder for you, right? By that, I mean the ease of rest and play. Surfing the urge to clean or get everything organized before you can do that. For 2s, I invite you to surf the urge to proactively reach out to someone who historically hasn't taken the initiative to check in or to support you. So be willing to receive even half as much as you give, even though this can feel extra uncomfortable for you to do so. For the 3, surf the urge to strive for your worth every freaking second of your day. So imagine yourself just like reclining into the now and noticing what you might do in this moment or the rest of your day if you just assumed you are worthy and you are already more than enough. You've done enough, right? What if you assume that? For the 4, surf the urge to adjust your appearance to be perceived as special or different, and allow space to just be, even when it feels uncomfortable or even shameful to blend in or just feel normal, right? For the 5, surf the urge to go down yet another rabbit hole of obscure information so that you can preserve your time and energy to be fully attentive to people who matter the most to you, for your relationships. For the 6, again, these are just examples, surf the urge to be suspicious and to repudiate, whether inwardly or outwardly, any positive feedback people give you. Open your mind and heart to believing and taking in affirmation and kindness from others, even though it can actually intensify your feelings of fear and vulnerability when you receive compliments. So 7, surf the urge to be constantly stimulated by new ideas or plans, right? Which they always hold this promise, but never actual fulfillment. So what might feel at first like an unbearable boredom amidst your inner silence will transform ultimately into this like heartfelt, fulfilling joy. I promise. It takes some time being with, though. So the 8, surf the urge to create a sense of aliveness or intensity through provoking others. So that actually creates like a thicker callousness around your own sensitivities. So resist confrontation consistently enough, right? Surfing that urge consistently enough to feel your own heart grow softer toward others and definitely more tender toward yourself. For the 9, surf the urge to over accommodate just to keep the peace. You do that, right? If you default, surf the urge for that unconscious, like urge to keep the peace. Well, okay, it's often conscious as well, but not always. So by resisting this habit you have of what's actually a kind of self-annihilation or self-censorship, you can actually make space in your life for true belonging, right? So that that can be so vital for you to really like finally feel like you belong rather than belonging through your adjustment and accommodation. So that's the Enneagram types. For your practice this week, I just gave you a lot. So renunciation, consider the value of this practice for your life. One way you can practice it is through the surf the urge practice. And then finally, if you are wanting to become more conscious of some things, urges that you have that maybe are Enneagram type driven, we review the section on the Enneagram types and how you can surf the urge around this theme of your type. So I hope this has blessed you to consider these ways in which releasing and not following your craving can actually serve your true joy. I hope that this nourishes your spirit and supports you in that way. Thanks. See you next week.